Welcome to Chinwag Tuesdays, your passport to a world of language and culture.
Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Chinwag Tuesdays. I'm Amanda and today's special guest is Michele. She's another Aussie living in the UK, doing what I do, but she's teaching Italian as a second language. So thank you so much for coming and joining me today on the episode.
Hey Amanda, how are you? Thank you for having me.
Thank you. So maybe we can start off with a little bit of an introduction, where in Australia you're from, where you live now, and how long you've been teaching Italian.
Yeah, so I'm from Melbourne, Australia. Now, when I say Melbourne, I mean like an hour south of Melbourne because it's sort of no one really knows exactly all of the suburbs that are outside of Melbourne. But I'm from the Mornington Peninsula, for those of you that are a bit more, you've been to Melbourne, I've sort of traveled around the bay a little bit. So I'm from there. And I moved to Rome in Italy, where I lived for 3 years. And that was because I have Italian heritage and I followed my passion to learn Italian as an adult. And then for visa reasons, I couldn't stay any longer because there were no other visa options. So I did the next best thing, which was instead of going back to Australia, which was too far away from Italy for me, I decided to apply for the Youth Mobility Scheme visa or whatever it was to come over to London. So that's where I am now in the UK. Thanks to the Commonwealth, I could get that particular visa. And I thought, right, I'll come here, get a job, get sponsored, get a European passport, and then go back to Italy and it'll all be fine. But then Brexit happened, and then I decided, well, I don't know what else to do. I'll just stay in London because by then it's created a life for myself here. Started the Intrepid guide and then Intrepid Italian with Michele. So yeah, it's sort of taken on moving a different country has sort of given me a different life and different opportunities. And yeah, I've been here for 10 years in London.
Wow.
So yeah, it's been a wild ride. It's been amazing, actually. It's been really fulfilling and wonderful.
Yeah. My gosh, 10 years. That's a long time. Do you get to go back home often?
Well, yeah, I mean, I plan to go home at least once every year. The only exception was a few years ago when we couldn't move at all. So it had been 3 years at that point by the time I went home. But yeah, I always make sure that I go home usually around Christmas time because it's also my birthday then. Just after Christmas is my birthday. So kind of get the Christmas, the birthday, and the New Year's, and then go back to Europe.
Yeah, that's nice. I mean, that was always kind of like my idea as well, was to go home at least once a year, but I moved to India 9 months before COVID hit. So I didn't go home for like 3.5 years, but I've been back twice. I'm planning another trip in October this year. So yeah, that's sort of the same goal for me, is at least once a year. But India's opposite seasons to Australia. So if I was to go to Australia in summer, that's Indian winter, but then I still get Indian summer. And if I go to Australia in Indian summer, that's Australian winter, but I love Australian summer. So I don't know when I'll plan it. Maybe I'll just change it up.
Twice a year though is pretty good. What's the commute time for that? Like 12 hours?
Too long. So if I was to count door-to-door travel from where I live in India to when I get to Brisbane, it's at least 2 days.
Really?
So yeah. So
in my head, you're a lot closer to Australia than I am. And why does it take you just as long to get home?
To get from my city to Delhi. So I've got an international airport at my city, but the flights just don't link up between Chandigarh, where I am, and Delhi. So I usually stay in Delhi for one night and get the early morning flight out of Delhi. Delhi to Singapore is like 5 or 6 hours. Layover in Singapore is usually 5 or 6 hours. Then Singapore to Brisbane is 8 hours.
Yeah, right. Okay. Yeah.
I mean, I could do the direct flight from Delhi to Melbourne, but then I'd have to still get to Brisbane anyway. And I'd rather not collect my bags in Melbourne and then do the change over there. I'd rather just go straight into Brisbane. Yeah.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah. So tell me more about Intrepid and what motivated you to start teaching Italian.
Yeah, so I've been teaching Italian online, like specifically teaching Italian online for about 4 years now, to answer your original question properly. So when I left Italy and I moved to the UK, I was really missing that daily challenge of learning about a new culture, learning a new language, and improving my existing Italian. And I just felt like coming to the UK was almost like taking a step back, which is what I didn't want. because the language is very similar, the culture is very similar with Australia. Not to say that there wasn't still a learning curve in terms of the things that we say in Australia that they don't really understand here, and vice versa. So that in itself was fun, but that took time and different conversations with different people for those things to arise. But generally in Italy, I was constantly learning something new and how things were done, and I really missed that. So that's when I decided to start the Intrepid Guide, which was basically a travel blog with a focus on language learning for travel. So living in London, typically people that live in London and in the UK, they're really spoiled for choice in terms of being able to travel around Europe quite cheaply and easily. There's so many airports and everything is really well connected with trains and all of that. So yeah, I think my first trip was where did I go? The Hague. I went to like a few places in like Belgium and the Netherlands, and I came back and I documented that in like a travel guide. And then also, like, if you go into the Netherlands, here's like a free Dutch travel phrase guide. And the same with like Belgium, and then talk about the differences between the languages there. Why do they speak Flemish and why is there French and all this sort of stuff. And that really got me excited. Those experiences that I didn't get when I was living in in the UK after having moved from Italy. So then I would travel more and went to Iceland and did like an Icelandic travel phrase guide, and I would like find people online or people that I would meet, and I would ask them, can you do the translations for these phrases so I can share it on my website? And it just sort of evolved that way. And then, when the C word came along, COVID came along, I decided that I wanted to focus on Italy and Italian more specifically. It was where it's my heritage, it's my passion, it's my blood. On my dad's side, he's Italian. And it's what I'm drawn to the most, and where I feel like I could really do some good to help people that are like me, have the Italian heritage, didn't learn or hear the language too much growing up, and now want to learn as an adult and are finding it daunting. I'm too old to learn a new language, or it's too hard, or I don't have time. And I thought, I'm going to lean into this, and I'm going to start to teach Italian to those people that are similar like me. So that's sort of how I went down that road. And then I created like a second brand that runs alongside the Intrepid Guide, which is Intrepid Italian with Michele. So I have an Instagram channel, a YouTube channel, obviously my website. So those are like two separate, and also TikTok for like the Intrepid Guide, but also for Intrepid Italian for those that just want to learn about Italy and learning Italian. So that's basically how it started. It started as a travel blog in general, all languages and all travel. And then I started to focus down on Italy. Yeah. And Italian.
Oh, that's so cool. I love that. As we've talked about before, I also have Italian heritage from my mum's side. So my mum was born in Australia, but her parents immigrated to Australia when Australia was doing their kind of immigrant come to Australia kind of push after World War. And I've always wanted to learn Italian. When I was living in Sydney, we were going to learn Italian, but then we moved to my small regional New South Wales hometown, and we learnt Punjabi, which is an Indian language of the state. I'm now living in India, of all languages. I know, talk about full circle. Anyway, so I definitely want to learn Italian, and I've been putting it off for too long, but I'm going to start. I'm going to start it this year. Somehow I'm going to start. The same thing, like it's part of who I am, and I've always wanted to try and have that kind of closest connection to that part of my heritage. So I can understand that.
Yeah, for sure. Living in Australia, when I started learning Italian, like very slowly, I mean, to give you a bit more context and a bit more background, my name is Michele, but it's with one L. And that is actually Michael in Italian. That's how you spell the name Michael in Italian. But the pronunciation is obviously different. So my dad, typical Italian, you name your children after your parents. The boy be named after the grandfather. And usually you would have like two parents that are of Italian heritage. But my mum is Australian with Irish and Lebanese heritage. And my dad is like full Italian. So he named my eldest sister after my grandmother, my nonna. My middle sister, well, what do you do? He gave her his nickname as a boy. So his name is Leonardo da Vinci. We know Leonardo, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Leonardo as well. Yeah. But his nickname growing up is Nardine. So that kind of translates to Nadine. So that's how she got her name. And then they were
Ah.
hoping for a boy, and then they got me. So Dad was like, oh, we're not going to probably have any more children. I'm just going to name her after my dad anyway. It's spelled the same, but you know, in Australia they'll just pronounce it Michele, and that's fine.
Yeah.
So this name that I've carried with pride, being named after such a wonderful man, my nonno, went through the World War and suffered a lot during that time, immigrated, basically moved the whole family over to Australia. The same just like your family after the Second World War, and it was tough. And my dad always sort of looked up to his dad, my nonno. And I thought, I don't mind having a guy's name. I'm a bit tomboyish at times. And so growing up and visiting my nonno, because my nonna had passed away when I was 3, I spent a lot of time with my nonno, and he didn't speak English. I didn't speak Italian. I definitely didn't speak his dialect. So Dad would always play the translator. So when my nonno passed away, I was about 16, 17. And it was like a flick of a switch. It was like, what am I doing? I really want to be able to speak Italian. And that was sort of like the inception of me, like getting a bit more curious about the language. So what do you do when you're 17? You don't really know how to learn a language, because at school we got like one term of Indonesian. And I'm like, what am I going to do with this? It doesn't even give me the chance to get really good at it. So I went to, Dimmick's bookstore, and went to the travel book section and picked up a travel phrase guide and just started with that. And I'm like, I was into it, but I had so many questions. I'm like, why is that word similar to that word, but it means something completely different? And it was all like to do with grammatical gender. I'm like, I don't know what grammatical gender is. Like, it's something that we don't really think about in English, because we don't have that. So I had too many questions. So I played around with the book for a while. But it wasn't until I was a bit more financially independent and I was 18, I had a car, I could drive, that I was looking around and scouting for different evening lessons. So I started to join those in my local area, but then they wouldn't go to the next level because there weren't enough students. So it was sort of a bit like up and down in terms of like my progression and where I could get help from. She wasn't a thing at the time. Online learning wasn't a thing. So it was very much the analog, go to class, get a book, and that sort of journey was what I really sort of started in.
Wow.
And then, like in my early 20s, by that point, I was still living on the Mornington Peninsula, which is an hour drive from Melbourne Centre, CBD. And then because there's a big Italian community, obviously, in Melbourne, specifically in Carlton, there are a couple of different Italian-specific language schools. So I joined 2 of those, and then a colleague was Italian. I would do a private lesson with him. So I was going to like formal classes, so to speak, 3 times a week, and then doing lots of self-study in my own time. And this was just like a snowball effect. The more I learned, the more I loved it, and the more I felt, like I feel more Italian than I feel Australian, but then I'm still Australian. I'm like Australian Italian. So it's sort of, who am I kind of thing. And this is sort of tying it a little bit back into your original comment about your Italian heritage. And I'm like, as soon as I started to focus more on my Italian heritage, I felt like I had finally found my place in the world a little bit, and why I didn't always quite connect with people around me. Because even though we are a country of immigrants, some people are a bit more Aussie than they're connected to their origins, like if they're Irish or Lebanese or the Greeks. Like the Greek culture is very strong, and I feel like the Italian culture is very strong. So I felt like the more that I learned about Italy and Italian, and I'm like, I felt more proud about my roots. And that was basically when I said to my dad, look, I want to go and try living in Italy. And he fully supported that. He was super proud that I was obviously named after his dad, that I was the only one of me and my 2 other sisters that had taken a real interest in our heritage. So he was the one that really supported my transition into living the next foreseeable future of my life in Italy. I went there with the idea that it would be indefinite, but then visas and all that sort of stuff put a bit of a stop to that. So I had to change course and course correct, so to speak. So
And do you speak Italian or English to your dad?
Well, like the relationship has always been in English, since I was little. So it's hard to make that transition, and it wouldn't feel natural. Also because when his whole family immigrated to Australia, he was 3 going on 4 years old. So he didn't go to school learning the grammar. He speaks a dialect. And that was like one of the reasons why he didn't teach us Italian growing up, was he would have arguments with his parents. He would teach us the dialect, but then his parents would say, that's our dialect, but that's not standard, that's not correct Italian, or whatever they would say.
Okay.
So he was like, well, I don't know the difference. I didn't go to school. So that's why that never got passed on to us.
Fair enough. Yeah.
So we speak in English, but then every so often we'll throw in a few things in Italian if we don't want anyone else to understand what we're saying.
That's what my mum does with her sisters.
Yeah, but he's just tickled pink, as he would say. He's just super proud that I've taken an interest in his heritage. Yeah, it's really nice. And it's brought us closer together, because now I feel like I understand him more as well, and typical protective Italian father figure sort of a thing. Yeah.
And what do you enjoy most about teaching Italian?
So, for me, it felt like a real struggle in the beginning, and definitely it's a mindset thing. So I thought, if I could at least help other people that are in the same shoes as I was at that time, because it really has changed the course of my life. I didn't think that I would ever leave Australia, but as soon as I lent into my heritage, or I lent into my passion, so you don't necessarily need to have Italian heritage, but if you do, I feel like there is a bit more passion behind it. But as soon as you lean into something that you're passionate about, that you're interested in, it can really just unlock and just change the course of your life for the better, and open you up to new experiences, meeting new people, learning more about the world, learning more about yourself. And it also gives you a fresh perspective on the country that you come from. So when I go back to Australia, it's like I'm a tourist and I'm falling in love with my own country in a different way. So learning Italian, it's wonderful if you've got the heritage. It's wonderful if you've got a partner. It's wonderful if you just want to travel to Italy and want to have more authentic experiences that you remember for life, and they become like these anecdotes that you just carry with you, and they become more valuable than a souvenir that you could buy. Because it's those connections that are just, they're just the best. From like, especially in Sicily for me, this is like in the early years of when I moved to Italy, and my Italian was still, it was good. It was like a B1 level or so. And we traveled to Palermo, which is the capital of Sicily, for a friend's birthday. So it was a group of us, English speakers, Aussies, Americans, English, British, and basically the 3 English-speaking countries. We didn't have any Canadians. And we were there in Palermo to celebrate a friend's birthday. And we were trying to find a restaurant the first night that we had arrived there. And we found like this restaurant that was super busy. I'm like, oh, this seems to be pretty popular for the locals. Like, we didn't see any English menus or anything. And we go in and it's packed, and we're sitting down and we stick out like a sore thumb because we're all very pale and everyone around us has got a lovely tan and dark features and very Sicilian. And there was a lady that she tapped my arm as I had come back from the bathrooms, and she was curious and she was asking about who we were and, oh, why are you here? And like, she was just super, this is all in Italian. She was just super proud that we had chosen her city to come and celebrate a friend's birthday. And not to go into too much detail, but basically invited us, a group of 5 or 6 girls, over to her house, complete strangers, we're all strangers, to her house the next day for afternoon tea, because she just wanted to have a chat and get to know us. She introduced us to her son and her partner, her husband, who she was having dinner with. And she had stopped me like a couple of times throughout the evening, and we exchanged numbers. And I'm like, this is bizarre. Like, this never happens to me anywhere. But it was like, I don't remember anything else from that trip other than meeting Maria in a restaurant in Palermo in the middle of summer. It was August. And just having like the best experience. And it was all thanks to being able to communicate in their language, in her language. And I'm like, this is what language learning and traveling is about. Like, it was epic. So I try and like encourage those sorts of situations everywhere I go. And it happened again last year in Florence. I made friends with the lady at the post office, and she ended up giving me a whole bunch of different stamp collections, like unique because I collected stamps a lot and international currency when I was younger. And she was just fascinated. She's like, oh, let me give you a few things I have at home. The Pope, like limited edition stamps.
Oh my gosh.
And I'm like, what is happening? And it was all just because I was having like a friendly chat. So this is why I like to teach Italian, because
Yeah,
you never know who you're going to meet, what conversations you're going to have,
true.
and the memories you're going to get because of it. So yeah, I get really
Yeah.
excited about it, as you can tell.
Oh, I love that. It's so good though. I love the passion. And I really appreciate what you said about when you find when I think what did you say about when you find a passion, how it kind of just like unlocks like different
Yeah,
experiences? Because I kind of feel like the same about with Aussie English with Amanda, in that this kind of happened by accident in a way. Like I was teaching English because I was in India. I mean, well, I'm still in India, but I was in India, COVID. I couldn't work at the time because of visa restrictions, but then I was able to work once I got my permanent residency, started teaching online. Then I noticed that people started to book me because I'm Australian and they needed more help to understand Australian English, the Australian accent. And then I realized that there was this kind of gap in one-on-one teaching of Australian English. So I kind of leaned into it, like you said, and then that's like how I'm here. So it was not something
yeah.
that I had kind of set out to do, but it's kind of happened by accident. But now it's like my passion. It's what I'm passionate about, and I love doing it.
Yeah, I mean, teaching is really rewarding, especially when, you have students that, I mean, there are so many different ways to skin a cat. I mean, not that you want to, but, there are so many different ways that you can do things. Like there are so many people that you could learn how to learn, like how to lose weight. But if you find the teacher that you resonate with,
Yeah.
then that's all you really need. If you find a method that really works for you, then that's, really like gold dust. So I feel like, yeah, once you find that, the rest is really easy because you get the passion that the teacher offers, you kind of bounce off that, and it just
Yeah.
makes the whole experience more pleasant and you become more successful because it's just everything works in harmony. You just enjoy it
Yeah.
so much. Yeah.
True. Yeah.
Teaching is
Yeah.
amazing.
I agree.
I love it.
Yeah.
Really fulfilling.
So you spent a couple of years in Italy. Tell me about some of the adjustments you had to make when transitioning. So obviously that's still a part of your heritage, but I'm sure that there were a lot of culture shocks and some kind of things that you had to adjust to.
Yeah. Well, I mean, bureaucracy was a big one because things in Australia
Yeah,
just
okay.
work differently and usually work a bit better. So that was like one thing. But what was a really nice perk that I wasn't expecting was the fact that there is a balance between work life, and it's sort of, people call it la dolce vita, the sweet life, the good life. But it was more that when I was in Australia and you're working a corporate job, everyone is like wanting to get to the next level, wanting to get a promotion, earn more money, buy the house, get a nice car, have a family, settle down. And there's sort of like this path that you're supposed to follow, that you're supposed to want to go down. But then when I came to Italy, the focus was like people would never talk about how much they earned. They would never talk about what the stresses of work. There was never really any comparison game. Everything was more just going out to dinner and having an aperitivo, which is like post-work drink, basically. Happy hour, but it goes for several hours before dinner at like 9 o'clock at night. And the emphasis was just more on friends, family, relationships, experiences, and in just enjoying the day-to-day pleasantries and not needing to wait to go on a holiday to unwind and relax. It was like
Yeah.
every day was, the focus was on where are we going tonight? Where are we going to hang out? Where are we going to go have dinner? What are we going to go do on the weekend? It was never, the conversation was always around, even specifically, what are we going to have for dinner? You'd be eating dinner, like, what are we going to have for dinner for tomorrow night? Like, it was just, the focus was very different. So I found myself not even thinking about work as much as I used to when I was in Australia, and the stresses and the deadlines. In Italy, there was a little bit of that, but it was just outside of work. everything was just on relationships and friendships and enjoying life. And that
Mm-hmm.
was what I really gained from living in Italy. It gave me a fresh perspective on life, which
Yeah.
is what I felt like I didn't know I needed actually. And it was great. Yeah,
Yeah.
it was really wonderful. I mean, there are a few other like small cultural things that felt a bit strange. Like my birthday is the 27th of December, and because no one
Mhm.
is ever around, really, like friends wise, I usually celebrate like 2 weeks before. That's what I would do in Australia. And in Italy, you're not allowed to celebrate your birthday before it happens. It's considered bad luck. Like you're going to jinx it. So I'm like,
Oh,
I don't want to
okay.
celebrate my birthday the next year. That doesn't feel right. I don't want to celebrate in January. I want to celebrate in at least my birthday month. So I couldn't do stuff
Yeah.
like that. And then if it's your birthday, you have to pay for the whole thing. You have to buy your own
Oh.
birthday cake. It's
Mm.
really, yeah, I'm like, no, I don't agree with that. If it's my birthday, it's my day. I'm not paying for your drinks when I'm inviting you out for dinner. Unless I'm throwing a party and I'm like buying all the booze and all the food,
Yeah.
that's different. But if I say we're going to go out on Saturday night for my birthday, I don't expect to pay the bill. Normally in Australia, you would divide the total of the bill.
Yeah.
That also includes the birthday person, and that's sort of how you would do it.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, just stuff like that. But it wasn't like a crazy adjustment. Most of the time, I felt like a tourist, just eyes wide open, soaking up everything and just really loving it.
So is there anything that you miss about your time there? I know you're going to say yes, so maybe I should re-question that and say, what do you miss about your time there?
In Italy, yeah, I
Yes.
mean, again, it's still that thing where I miss that daily challenge of improving my Italian. Italy is different when you're living in the UK, and yes, there are a lot of Italians that live here. It's still the
Yeah.
day-to-day conversations that you don't get to engage in
Mm-hmm.
that build up the confidence, that help you pick up new words and new phrases, to help you understand like different accents and pronunciation. It's all that
Yeah.
sort of stuff that I really miss.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I also miss just being surrounded by all the history. Like I lived in Rome.
Oh,
To get to work,
yeah.
I would walk past the Colosseum. That sounds ridiculous. Like who,
Amazing.
it was a dream. It was my dream that I had. I was like,
Yeah.
I want to live in Rome. It was the first European city. It was the first place I saw outside of Australia. And
Yeah.
it was incredible. I just absolutely loved it. And I learned so
Mm-hmm.
much. I would go on walking tours and just again, I saw the world in a different way because
Yeah.
there's just so much history that we don't really learn about in school in Australia.
Yeah.
And Rome specifically is like an open air museum because there are so many monuments that you can see just from the street, from the bus, everywhere you go. There's a story behind everything, and that's what a Roman actually told me. They're like, I would ask, there's a fountain there, and it's like I start this whole story about the history of this particular fountain. I'm like, this is just like a little wall fountain. It wasn't like the Trevi fountain. And it's like, Michelle, there's one thing you need to know is that there's always a reason for everything. There's always a story behind everything.
Yeah.
And that stuck with me. And that curiosity is something that, I take and apply whenever I travel. And even in London, in the UK,
Yeah.
I am always curious to know more about the names of places, the etymology. I absolutely love learning about etymology, the history of words and
Yeah.
where phrases come from. And it's
Mm-hmm.
just really exciting for me. It's quite geeky,
Yeah.
but again, it helps you form a better and deeper understanding of things. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And what about moving to London? Like, I imagine the culture is, like you said, a bit similar to Australia, but there would be some differences as well. So, like, tell me about some of the culture shocks you had when you got to the UK.
Okay. Well, I had to Google this because I really wasn't sure why no one else knew about this. So before I went full time with the Intrepid Guide and Intrepid Italian with Michelle, I was working a corporate job as a UI UX designer, which is basically
Yeah.
designing websites, but also doing like all the user testing. So whenever there was someone's birthday in the team, we would have a cake and we would sing happy birthday and have the cake and then go back to work. So the first time this happened, we're all standing around, and I think it was a guy. He was celebrating his birthday, and I was dictating his actions and what he was doing because he wasn't doing it right, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So the cake was on the table, saying happy birthday, all the candles are lit. And I said, well, now you have to make a wish and blow out the candles.
Yeah.
But you can't tell us what your wish is. And I can't remember if they do that here or not, but then things got a little bit weird. And I said, now you have to cut the cake, but you're not allowed to touch the bottom. And he wasn't, because he like, why are we cutting the cake already? I'm like, no, you have to cut the cake. It's your birthday. You have to cut the cake. You can't touch the bottom. And I think that's when you make the wish. You can't tell anyone. Then if you do touch the bottom with the knife, then you have to kiss the person of the opposite sex that's closest to you. And they're like, Michele, what are you talking about? What am I talking about? This is what you do when you celebrate someone's birthday. The birthday person cuts the cake, makes a wish. They're not allowed to touch the bottom. And they were like, Michele, I don't know where you're from. And I'm like, what is happening right now? So later I had to go on Reddit or wherever I was on Quora. And there were this conversation about, yeah, we do that in Australia too. And then someone was like, no, well, we don't do that in Queensland. Oh, but we do it in Melbourne. I'm like, yeah, we do it in Sydney too. And I'm like, maybe this is very specific to a certain part of Australia and not the whole country. And then there was also a few other like cultural things like that I didn't realize would be so different.
Yeah.
And then there are other expressions like, I mean, it's a little bit vulgar, but I would say I cracked the shits, or you just fucked me off, or whatever. Like, just obviously vulgar expressions, but you're expressing something. And they were like, when I said I've just cracked the shits, like, Michele, do you need to go to the toilet? Like, are you okay? They thought I had like diarrhea or something. I'm like, no, I'm angry. I've cracked it. Like I'm on the straw that broke the camel's back. You know what I mean? Like, never heard of that before. So there were a few like expressions like that. The difference between like saying trousers and pants and undies and I don't know. It just slack. They call them slacks here. I'm like, I would just call it pants. If I'm wearing something on my legs, if it's not jeans, it's pants.
Yeah, that's
and they were like,
true.
no, but your pants is your underpants. Well, then what do you call? Like, it was just. It didn't make any sense to me. I'm like, but if your undies, your underwear goes under your pants, then what are pants? It just didn't make any sense to me. But it was just those sorts of things.
Yeah.
Everyday, expressions and words. But it was interesting. But then I also had to learn things that were offensive here that aren't offensive in Australia. So that was also interesting.
What were some examples?
I mean, to be fair, I get mixed reviews on this one. But when I just moved to the UK and I said, I'm fresh off the boat here. Like I don't know where everything is.
Yeah.
I'm still learning. I didn't know the tube system yet, the underground here in London with massive network. I'm pretty fresh. I'm fresh off the boat. And in Australia, we say that like it's nothing because literally to get to Australia, if you're an immigrant, you're catching a boat. And we're a big country surrounded by water. It's not an offensive thing to say. And then someone's like, Michele, you can't say that here. I'm like, why? Like, what? And like, yeah, but it's quite offensive to a particular kind of person. Like, who? I'm like, I couldn't figure it out. So until this day, I will tell people about it. And they're like, oh, really? I didn't know that. But then other people are like, yeah, you can't say that. I'm like, I don't know where that's come from. But I'm like, and even saying wog. My dad is Italian and he will jokingly call us a wog, and I guess it's just like saying like the N word. Between certain people, they're allowed to say it amongst themselves, but maybe not outside of that bubble. But for us, it's almost like a term of endearment between each other.
Yeah, that's how I grew up saying it. Yeah, I'm half wog.
And there's nothing wrong with that. Like it's but you kind of have to learn those things, the subtleties in language. And I kind of feel that in the UK, they're maybe like 2 or 3 years ahead of certain things, like maybe like the LGBTQ community and stuff like that, or like unisex bathrooms. Like back in Australia, like at that point, there was definitely like a time where you wouldn't have self-checkout at the supermarket. It was very much all the rage here for a very long time before it got to Australia. So I feel like there's generally a bit of a delay and a lag between certain things. So we're not always really clued up on what's offensive yet in Australia. So like the sushi mango, the guys that are from Melbourne.
Oh, yeah, I was about to say
That
the
are,
wog.
yeah, the Wogs. They have Italian heritage, but instead of,
Yes.
I think they've also stopped using the word Wog,
Yeah.
but they use more ethnic dad.
Yes, that's right. Ethnic dads, because that one's Italian. Are they all Italian, or is there a Greek in there
Yeah.
as well?
Well, the three of them are brothers, so they're all
Oh,
Italian.
okay, right. Yeah.
Yeah, but I kind of noticed, at least in their marketing online that I see here, and I saw them recently, actually, a couple of months ago, that they call it an ethnic dad, not like a wog or whatever. I'm like, oh, this is
Yeah.
interesting. But yeah, there is that transition. But their tour was called Off the Boat instead of, so I'm not quite sure if they understand that that can also be offensive. I don't know,
Yeah.
but it's like, oh, I mean, I'm fine with it because I
Yeah.
know that there's no malice intended,
Yeah.
but there are still things to learn and be aware of at least. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, true. I feel like that's, yeah, pretty standard, I guess, any country you go. Like when I moved here, there was definitely things that I had to be kind of more mindful of. In Australia, we're very direct most of the time. We're pretty straightforward with our thoughts and feelings, like, oh, no, fuck that. I can't be bothered, or fuck that kind of
Yeah.
situation. Indians are not like that. Like, I remember when I first, my husband's Indian, that's why I moved here. So I remember when I first started talking or like connected with my husband, we'd be talking on call, and like I would say something like, oh, fuck that sort of thing, or can't be fucked. And then he would get like really offended and he'd be like, you don't have to be rude about it. I'm like, I'm not. I'm just being direct. I'm just being straight. But then when I moved here, I realized that people will beat around the bush. They don't directly tell. They kind of they tell you what you want to hear, or they just kind of go around in circles. Oh, and it drives me crazy. I hate it. I'm like, I'll have to say to my husband, is that a no or is that a maybe? Like if he says maybe to something, I'm like, is that a actually maybe or do you mean no?
Yeah, that can be hard. I've heard about that. Yeah, in Asian cultures specifically.
Yeah.
I'm not quite sure how I would survive because I would also find that frustrating because I'm very much, I'll wear my heart on my sleeve. I will tell you
Yeah.
if I'm having a bad day. I will tell you what's going on. I'm very
Yeah.
transparent. I don't know how to hide my feelings.
Yeah.
So I just, it would really help me if we're just on the same page and you're just super direct and super straight. I'm not quite
Yeah.
sure how I would manage to readjust. But then,
Yeah.
like in Italy, I had to kind of go the other way and be a bit more aggressive with things.
Right.
Like in the UK, especially in Australia, if there's a queue, I mean, there are no queues in Italy. You basically skip the line, you push
Yeah.
in,
Oh
and
yeah, like
that's sort
here.
of how they survive. You're like, because it's very much survival of the fittest kind of a thing.
Yeah.
Unless you're at the post office and they give you a number and you can't push in. But if you're at a bus stop, there is no line that forms like there is a line that forms here in the UK or in Australia. Like there's the courtesy, it's like first come, first serve. In Italy, that doesn't, it's like who's the best
Yeah.
at sneaking through that wins.
Yeah.
And learning how to cross the road when there isn't a pedestrian crossing and needing to like stare down the driver before you cross the road, stuff like that.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
They do that here,
Um,
actually. You put your hand out like
yeah.
this when you're crossing the road. Like if I'm walking in front and like there's pedestrian crossings, but people don't stop for them. So you have to judge and you put your hand out like stop and then you cross
Oh,
the road.
yeah.
Yeah. So I'm learning how to do that. But yeah, same thing. There's no lines. People just push in front all the time. I remember like lining up for the toilets in a shopping mall. People kept pushing in front. And I was like pretty new here and I didn't know how to like say, excuse me. And now I kind of like push in front back, or I'll like, I'm learning Hindi so I can actually have that conversation with them and say like, I was here first. The line's here.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, but I
That's an
didn't realize
interesting
Italy was
experience.
like that.
Yeah, I mean, in Italy, you don't put your hand out really. I mean, I put
Yeah.
my hand up to say thank you, not to
Yeah.
when I'm in Italy, but I'll say thank you if I'm at a normal pedestrian crossing in the UK.
Yeah.
For some
Cheers.
reason, I thank them here. Yeah, like cheers, thanks or whatever. Or they're giving way when it's not a
Yeah.
pedestrian crossing and you're at like a T intersection or whatever. But yeah, in Italy, you kind of just look at the driver, let them know, like make sure that you've got their attention, and then you just step out and then they'll stop and then they'll keep going. But you
Wow.
kind of need to, like, if there are several lanes, you need to kind of check
Yeah.
each one, yeah, as you
Yeah.
go along. Because it's not necessary, it's not a given that the car on that lane closest to you
Yeah.
that the next car along is going to stop because they've noticed that the other car has stopped. So you kind of need
okay.
to check as you cross, kind of like that Frogger arcade game, like you're
Yeah.
jumping.
All right.
Yeah.
Do you get homesick for Australia? And if you do, how do you handle it?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's a mixture of like when you get older, your parents get older, and you start to
Yeah.
have a different kind of appreciation for things in life and what things are important. So yeah, it'll come in waves, and sometimes it might just be like a fleeting moment, get nostalgic because I'll hear like an Aussie song, or
Yeah.
it could be a little bit more intense that might last a few days or whatever. But I
Yeah.
think it's always important to have like you know the next time you're going to go home, and you have that to look forward to, and you know that's
Yes.
coming. So that's why I always go home at least once a year, and I know that I'm going to be there for like 2 or 3 months, so I can do that now.
Yeah.
Before, when I was working a full-time job, I wasn't able to take too much time off. It was only like a few weeks, like 3 weeks at the most. But yeah, sometimes I'm like, oh, I feel like watching Kath and Kim or watching like an Aussie comedy just to sort of pep me up a little bit. But yeah, it can really depend on the intensity of the emotion and how I will react. But I sometimes I just need a bit of a dose of Aussiness. Chat to a friend here that's Australian, and just reminisce about things back home, childhood memories and stuff like that. But
Yeah.
generally, I feel like it's important to know that you got a trip coming up back home and that you'll get your fix, sort of a thing. But then it's hard to leave. But yeah,
Yeah.
it's a constant battle backwards and forwards. How do you deal with it?
Yes. Oh, that constant battle. Well, yes, I think the hardest thing for me when I first moved to India was, like I said before, 9 months after I moved here, the pandemic started. So I didn't have that idea of when I'd be able to go home. So I really started to struggle at like, I think I'd been here maybe 2.5 years, nearly 3 years, and I was really struggling because that's when there was a really bad second wave here as well. Like people
Yeah.
were dying outside hospitals. Like it was just crazy here at that time. And that uncertainty, I was really homesick at that time. So then I started to watch like Australian shows on Netflix. Like I watched like Back to the Rafters, the sequel of Pack to the Rafters, and I never even watched Pack to the Rafters just because I was like,
Neither
I
have
want that Australian accent. There was another Australian series on Netflix because at that time Indian Netflix didn't have a lot of Aussie shows, and I didn't have a VPN or anything. So I watched this one series called The Letdown, which is about like first time mums. I'm not a mum, I don't have kids, but it was really funny because like just their kind of humor, the locations where they filmed at, the main characters. Like, do you remember Noni Hazelhurst, the actress? Yeah,
Yeah,
so
she
she
used to
was
be on
in
Play
that.
School, wasn't she?
Yes, exactly. So
Yeah,
she was
she was
in
on Play
that.
School.
Yeah.
Oh, right.
So yeah, like I would do that, but now same thing. I feel like it comes and goes. It's kind of that fleeting moment, but I feel like since I've started my Instagram and teaching more Aussie English, those homesickness moments don't happen as much. I think because I'm kind of immersing myself in Australian
Mm,
culture, history, all that kind of stuff. So it doesn't really happen too much. Speaking of Aussie comedy, though, there's this one YouTube channel that I love watching with my husband. It's called Yeah Mad TV. And it's basically just like a bunch of people that get together trying to tell each other dad jokes. It started off as dad jokes and now they're really vulgar kind of jokes. But anyway, and the goal is the other person's not allowed to laugh. And if they laugh, they take a shot of vodka. So by the end, everyone's just wasted. But it's really funny. Like I would watch that like once a week because it's just the humor, the Aussie humor. My
yeah,
husband doesn't always understand it. I have to explain things to him, like if he doesn't get the joke. But yeah, I normally just do that. Or my go-to meal that I cook when I'm feeling homesick is lasagna. So
mm,
I'll maybe like cook a meal that reminds me of home or watch something Aussie. But yeah, it doesn't happen too much anymore. And I really think that's because of what I do now as my business and a profession.
yeah. And then sometimes you have a crate. Like I always have a jar of Vegemite. Like every time I,
Yeah,
come back, there's always like Vegemite lasts forever if you, use it sparingly. But also in the
yeah,
UK, there are lots of Aussies, so they do have like, I mean, it's super expensive, but there are places that you can get Tim Tams and Vegemite and
yeah.
Allen's lollies and
Oh,
the Cadbury
yes.
chocolate that you can't get here. That is the Australian version, like the snack. They're called snack, where they have like the different flavors.
Oh, yeah, the snack
Um,
boxes. Favorites boxes?
No, not those ones,
No.
but I think it was
Oh, the snack. They have like the 5 different filled flavors, right?
yes, yeah.
Those ones?
Pineapple was
Yeah.
always my favorite. Yeah,
Oh,
with the
I love the
pineapple, the
strawberry one.
strawberry.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, that costs like an arm and a leg here, but if I'm having a moment, I'm like, oh, let's go get some Tim Tams, you know?
Yeah. My husband actually came home with like 6 packets of Tim Tams a few months ago. I don't know where he got them from. Like some store here had them and some
Yeah.
Allen's lollies. And I think I don't know what else came home with. I can't remember now, but yeah, usually I'll bring stuff back, or like I think during COVID as well, my family sent care packages because I was able to receive things. So that was really good. But yeah, I've got like a ton of Vegemite in there. I did notice though that for a while the Starburst fruit chews were like out of stock. You couldn't get them. And I just saw an article, I think a few weeks ago, that they're now coming back. They've managed to find the main ingredient that they couldn't get. Oh, so I'm really excited to get some of those when I visit. Because the red ones, the cherry Starburst, were my favorite.
Oh,
And that
I
was the
never
one
really got
flavor
into
you couldn't get.
Starburst. Ah, right. See, for me, I love clinkers. Clinkers are just,
Oh,
I
what
love
about them?
clinkers. Clinkers are my favorite. They're so good.
Yeah.
But I think they've discontinued fantails, is what I heard. Fantails I
Really?
also love. Yeah.
Well, I enjoyed a
Um,
good fantail.
yeah, fantails and minties. Minties are amazing too. But yeah,
What about
fantails were
minties? The
like,
Redskins?
yeah,
Mm.
Redskins, which
Are they
have
still
they
called
renamed that now?
Redskins?
Yeah, I know. And then they also have like the Golden Gay Time ice cream. What are they still called? The Gay Time?
I think so. I
Remember
think they're still
those?
Gay Times. Yeah.
Yeah. But then, yeah, there are still many things like that they've had
Coon
to
cheese got
rename.
renamed.
Yeah, coon cheese
That's
and
now
the
something.
fads. They used to be called fags when you'd go down
Oh
to like
yeah,
a milk bar, and
the
I'd
fag.
get like fizzos, and then I'd get like a
Yeah,
packet of fags, like these
yeah.
white sticks with like a dot of red at the end. I'm
No,
super cool. I'm smoking.
yeah.
And I had to call them fads. Yeah. What else have they
Yes.
done?
All
Yeah,
right. Well,
coon
can we
cheese.
just take a step back to your milk bar comment? I never grew
Yeah.
up calling it a milk bar in New South Wales. We called it just
No.
a corner store.
Oh yeah, we would call them a milk bar.
Yeah,
Yeah. Milk
that's so
bars were like the
interesting.
best growing up. Having a
I
milk
just
bar
thought of a
nearby.
milk bar being like a when I heard milk bar for the first time, I thought it was like a milkshake bar. Somewhere you
Oh,
go for
well, yeah, well,
milkshakes.
yeah, fair enough.
Yeah.
But yeah, is it the same? Like, have you been to like a milk bar in Victoria and like no, like is it? Do they have the same setup? Do they sell the same
I don't
things?
know, but I saw this reel the other week of this one Aussie dude. I think maybe he's from Melbourne, or maybe he's from
Yeah.
New South Wales. I can't remember, but he did a reel with someone from New South Wales, and one of them was from Melbourne or Victoria. And they were doing like this kind of comparison, like milk bar, corner store, potato scallop, potato cake, and differences
Yeah,
between the
potato
two
cakes.
different states. Yeah, so I called them potato
Yeah.
scallops growing up.
Mm.
Ice lolly and an icy pole.
Yeah, we call it an icy pole.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Or
Yeah.
ice block, I think. I call it ice block. I think ice lolly is WA.
Ah, well, yeah, we call it an icy pole. God,
God,
subtle differences.
I
Same diff,
know.
really. Like,
Yeah,
yeah.
imagine like poor people learning the language. Like they get to Australia and not only do they have to learn slang, but then they have to learn like the regional differences of words.
I mean, Australia is nothing in comparison to the variety in the UK. There, like some of the accents are so extreme. Plus,
True.
they also have their own local jargon, their own way of speaking.
Wow.
But
Okay.
it's super fascinating because they're all
Yeah.
like the UK is a lot smaller than Australia, yet there's so much more variety
Yeah.
of language and accent and pronunciation. But I think it's amazing. But yeah, there
Yeah.
are a few things here that I picked up language wise that we don't say in Australia.
Yeah.
Like normally in Australia, I would say, oh, didn't you? Like, haven't you? But in the
Yeah.
UK or in London, especially, they're like, did you not? Have you not? Like, they'll
Oh,
phrase it
okay.
differently and it becomes more longer and there's a bit more emphasis. Did you
Yeah.
not? Have you not? Like, and you can kind of hear that sort of language in like movies like Notting Hill or Love Actually and stuff like
Yeah.
that. But yeah, I became more aware of their way of speaking. And they'll say things like, I am stood, or I am sat. I'm like, well, that's not correct grammar, right? I'm like, I'm standing or I was standing. You wouldn't say I was stood or I was sat. But there are like 3 verbs that they will use that way of speaking. I was stood, I was sat. What's the other one? I was stood, I was sat. I think it might be just those 2, but something about those movements or stationary verbs that, like, no, I would say I was standing or I was sitting. Because if you say I was sat, to me, it sounds like someone put you there. Like they sat me there. I was stood there, like someone made me stand there. Like, but that's not what they mean.
Oh,
So
that
that
is
sort of
very
stuff is,
interesting, actually.
or they'll, like in South London, they'll say like we was instead of we were. Everything is was, I was, you was, we was, they was.
Interesting.
Yeah. So it's obviously technically grammatically incorrect, but it's correct for here. So those sorts of things. But it was
Wow.
still like, if I would hear it, I'd be like, oh, it hurts my ears a little bit.
I
But
was
I'm
just
like,
like touching a
no.
bit.
Language is made by the people that speak it. There's no such thing as right and wrong. It's just differences between places. So, yeah, like I said, you're constantly learning.
Well, apparently there's a small pocket in Adelaide where some people have an almost kind of like Londoner accent, because Adelaide was South Australia was the only state that wasn't colonized or settled by convicts. It was the only state that had the free settlers there. And so the accent, it was a bit more, and I didn't realize that until I interviewed someone from the UK living in Australia now. He moved as a kid when he was 3 or something. But he said that there's like a small kind of population or a pocket of suburbs in Adelaide where, you can kind of pick up a bit of a British accent. So that was interesting to hear.
Yeah, so my friend, one of them actually I met her in Italy, and she was on that trip that I was talking about earlier when we went to Palermo for my friend's birthday.
Yeah.
She's from Adelaide and her parents are both British.
Okay.
But like talking to her, she would say things, she would definitely have like the British pronunciation of things, Aussie British pronunciation.
Yeah.
So while here I am sitting saying dancing and castles, and she'd be like castle and dancing, and I'm like, what? This doesn't sound right.
See, I'm a mix. I say dance, but then I say castle. So God knows where I pick things up from.
But like the movie, The Castle, how does he say? He's like, a man's home is his castle. Or he might have said castle, to be fair. Maybe it changes depending on what I'm talking about. Yeah, I think it's one of those words where sometimes I change the way I say it, but generally it's castle and dance, not dance.
Yeah.
And stuff like that.
Oh, yeah.
And then what's the other one? Data. When I'm listening to people online and they'll say data, I'm like, no, it's data.
Oh, yeah, say data. Yeah. Data.
Yeah.
Data just reminds me of American English, or the American accent. Data.
That's where I hear it a lot, but I was saying, no, it's data. And I'm very aware that it's a very much an Aussie pronunciation of the word, but I'm like, I'm leaning into it. Like I'm going to own it. It's fine.
So to finish up, what advice would you give to individuals who are learning Italian or any other second language, particularly those living abroad?
Yeah, so I feel like the hardest thing is always getting started, right? Like if you take that first step, then everything else becomes a little bit easier. I think we get in our heads a lot about things, like it's going to take too long, or it's too hard, or I'm not good enough. Especially for me, like these were the emotions that I was going through, and I still go through. I'm still, improving my languages that I've learned over the years. But I find that it's once you sort of take the next step or the first step, and that could be just opening up the textbook or just turning on a film or turning on a show, that as soon as you do that, you it reminds you of why you're doing this in the first place, and it sets like that passion on fire again that I was talking about earlier.
Yeah.
And it sort of it unlocks just enough for you to want to keep going. So if you just go in there just not putting any pressure on it and just thinking, I'll just do a couple of minutes, like you don't need to say I'm going to do 2 hours today. I'm like, well, that's a big ask. But if you can just do a little and often, that's enough to keep the momentum. And usually once you get started, you don't want to stop. At least I found that personally.
Yeah.
And I think it's also important to know the difference between like active and passive learning. Like it could
Yeah.
be that you're doing the dishes and you're just listening to something passively. Passive learning you could do for a long time, and you're not super engaged in what you're watching or listening to,
Mm.
but something that you have in the back that you're listening to while you're cleaning the house, doing errands, driving, and it just sort of in the background, and then you might tune out and tune into it, sort of thing, like where you're distracted by doing other things. So
Yeah.
it's usually like the passive learning happens when you're either not actively participating in the process of learning and you're doing something else, so like you're multitasking. But then, and that's fine to do that, but it's also really important to make sure that you have active learning, and that's when you're focused and that your goal is to learn, and that
Yeah.
is more tiring, and you know the difference between passive and active learning. So as long as
Yeah.
you have like a balance between those two, and you know that I was, learning Italian, or I was learning Australian English or whatever for like 5 hours. They're like, yeah, but were you passively learning it or were you actively learning it? And it's
Yeah.
clear it can get quite tiring, and it's good to have both. But it's important to recognize that if you feel like you're not making the progress you want to be making, that you need to just make sure that you're aware of what kind of learning you're actually doing.
Yeah.
And also, if you have certain goals, like your goal is to live in Australia or live wherever, and you want to speak professional, you don't want to speak with a professional proficiency, that you focus on learning technical terms and the different
Hmm.
ways of phrasing things or explaining yourself, and the kind of words that you would use in a meeting or on a phone call and that sort of stuff. Like that you make sure that you're focusing on learning the most important parts of the language that you will need to be using on a daily basis for whatever, or if it's for
Yeah.
traveling, what kind of phrases you're going to need to know and the vocabulary you're going to need to learn. So this is
Hmm.
why I haven't really mentioned this earlier, but I focused on using my method is around 80-20 learning. So focusing
Yeah.
on the 20% of the language right from the beginning that you're going to be using in 80% of the situations that you find yourself in. And this is
Okay.
based on actually an Italian economist. He kind of discovered that 80% of the land in Italy was owned by 20% of the population. And
Yeah.
then, so his name was Vilfredo Pareto. So you might have heard this is like the Pareto principle
Hmm.
with the English pronunciation. But then
Yeah.
it was Joseph M. Duran, who was a marketing consultant, noticed that this sort of ratio 80-20 or 70-30 or 60-40, where there's like a majority and a minority, that
Yeah.
this sort of ratio could be found and applied to other areas of our life. So you
Okay.
could say, for example, that when you're watching Netflix, there's usually like 80% of the viewers are watching 20% of the shows on Netflix. These 20% of the shows on Netflix are getting all the attention. If you're on a news website, that there are usually 80% of the attention is going to just 20% of the articles, or 90-10
Mm.
sort of thing. So the same thing happens in languages where you will be using the same vocabulary or the same parts of the grammar, the same tenses over and over, that you should focus on first, that will
Yeah.
give you that sort of the confidence to speak in the environment that you need to use that language in, because you
Hmm.
know it and you've studied it, as opposed to learning the names of body parts or
Yeah.
things you don't really need if you're traveling around in Italy. Like I don't need to talk
Yeah.
about my arms, my legs, unless it's an emergency, and then I might need to learn it. But
Yeah.
it's if you're in Italy, for example, and you're traveling around, you'll need to know how to introduce yourself, making small talk, checking into a hotel or whatever, asking for
Yeah.
directions, knowing how to order food and drink, all these sorts of things, knowing how to pay for something and different
Yeah.
payment options. So those are the sorts of things that you would focus on for that environment and for those goals that you might have if you just want to learn the language for travel. But
Yeah.
again, if you're learning it for professional reasons, then you should focus on learning that kind of, jargon, so to speak, technical terms that you wouldn't necessarily
Mm.
need to know if you were just traveling in that country.
Yeah.
So yeah, the passive and active learning, doing little and often, yeah, 80-20. And I
Oh.
think it's just getting over that initial hurdle. Once you start, that's sort
Yeah.
of when the momentum kicks in.
Yeah.
And they say that like a body in motion stays in motion. So if you keep up the habit of doing
Yeah.
something, then you will keep the habit. Yeah, even if it's just a few minutes a day, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow, that's great advice. I do too much passive learning of Hindi than I do active, and that's why I'm not improving. So I'll need to take this advice myself.
Yeah, I mean, it's sometimes you only have time for the passive learning at the end of the day when you're tired, But if you can kind of just say, right, I'm going to watch this movie, but for the first 10 minutes, I'm going to have a pen and paper with me, and I'm going to write down any new words that I haven't heard before or that I want to remember. And at least you've done something, because then you become more aware of what you're probably going to find that you enjoy it, because I definitely do. And this is what I like to do, is find like a show or something that I really like, and then take notes. And I'm constantly like on the dictionary or on the internet looking it up and trying to find like a good translation for it.
Yeah, well, I'm going to do that. Like, I might just commit to 2 minutes to begin with.
Yeah,
Start
for sure.
off
And
small.
I mean, it might not be at the start of the movie. It could just be that it's like you see, like if you're using subtitles, and you're like, oh, that word is interesting. And then you're like halfway through the movie, and then that's when you do like your 10 minutes.
Yeah.
It doesn't need to be from the beginning, but it could just be once you find a bit of flow in the movie, and then you use like the first word that you see that you want to document. Yeah.
Yeah, I like it. Oh, that's great advice.
It's little things that you can kind of make it, that you can use to make things a bit easier.
Yeah, definitely. All right. Well, finish up. I know I just said that before, but now the last question, just the usual contact information. So how can people contact you?
Yeah, so you can contact me on Intrepid Italian with Michele if you want to learn Italian, or just Intrepid Guide on Instagram. But yeah, my website is the Intrepid Guide. You can email me there. I'm on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram. I have a website. So
all the
just
things.
type in the Intrepid Guide and you will find me.
Great. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining me. It's always a pleasure to talk to Australians. I think that's another reason why I don't feel so homesick as much anymore, because I'm speaking to lots of Aussies these days for this channel. So yeah, it's been great chatting.
Yeah, thank you so much. I had a blast.
All right. Thank you.